Aloha and Talofa, welcome back. We got Al Jazeera here. How are green politics faring as the climate crisis worsens? Inside story. So they're going to talk to some Green Party people from around the world, I'm pretty sure.
It's been a year of mixed fortunes for Green politicians. In the US, Jill Stein could have a big say in the presidential race. Yet the Greens fared badly in European elections this year. So as the climate crisis worsens, are Greens winning or losing influence around the world? This is Inside Story.
See, I think how we don't have much influence in America hurts us around the world. If we could get some influence in the US, that would boost us throughout the world.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidam. Now, green politics were once fringe issues promoted by radical voices, you could say, on the sidelines, protesting about protecting the environment. But today, the worsening climate crisis means green policies are centre stage. It's seen the one-time protest movement make it to government in 11 European countries and also in New Zealand in recent times. And in next week's US presidential election, voters in many states can pick Green Party candidate Jill Stein. Her performance could have a big say on whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris who makes it to the White House.
Kamala.
But what is the real influence of the Greens in global politics at a critical time in the climate crisis? Can they meet the political challenge from those opposed to policies intended to meet climate change targets? We'll be speaking to our guests in just a few moments after this report from Kulsum Sharif.
The two US presidential candidates offer contrasting views on climate change. Republican Donald Trump has called it a scam. When he was president, he pulled the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Democrat Kamala Harris considers climate change an existential threat. As with much in American politics, environmental issues are yet another dividing line in an already polarized nation. But voters have a third choice, the Green Party candidate.
Oh yeah.
Some believe the party's strong climate stance has been overshadowed by another issue. Jill Stein is on the ballot in almost all states.
See, but look, we need people in these chairs. These people are you. Like, Jill Stein can be anywhere, wherever she's at. We need people to be there with her. And if, like, I get a lot of complaints about Jill Stein, fine. You don't think she's the best leader? Cool. Get in the party. You lead. So I'm gonna try to help lead in the next, couple upcoming years. Like I said, I'm gonna be on the neighborhood board and I'm gonna run for Senate in 2 years. But we got to be the ones that do it. It's a people party. It's a people-powered party, right? So if the people don't get in it, it won't have no power. The Democrats and the Republicans are corporate-powered parties. The corporations are going to power those parties, whether we're in any party or not. So, I mean, if you really want your voice heard, you got to step up and start speaking.
But calls to end Israel's war on Gaza have been heard more loudly, perhaps, than her calls to address the climate emergency.
We are the one pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, climate emergency, pro-reparations, pro-abolishing student debt, free public higher education. We're offering what the American people are demanding.
You just have to get in the party if you want it.
Green parties performed poorly in the European Union elections in June, wiping out spectacular gains made in the previous vote. Greens, especially in Germany, have strongly supported sanctions against Russia for the Ukraine war, impacting fuel prices. A cost of living crisis and economic uncertainty in Europe have hit voters hard. Tough times have made implementing the EU's green policies, the so-called Green Deal, more difficult. And they are under attack from resurgent populist and right-wing parties.
The far right is not interested in doing legislation on the Green Deal. If you look at the last 5 years, they almost voted against all the elements of the Green Deal. So I think the centre now really needs to stand together and work on the Green Deal.
Europe's farmers rallied against green policies over the past 2 years, rejecting calls to limit use of chemicals in agriculture and other environmental regulations. Some voters say their opposition reflects the wider political difficulties in implementing green policies.
It's disappointing the Greens performed so poorly. They're the only party that actually does something sensible, but they're being sabotaged because everyone wants to protect the environment, but never at their own expense.
Right.
While politicians and voters argue, experts warn the climate crisis is worsening. Across the world, countries have been ravaged with floods, droughts and wildfires, with loss of life, livelihoods and huge economic repercussions. While the Greens led the way as a protest movement in highlighting these issues decades ago,
I mean, really, you guys talk about, oh, we gotta go with the Democrats because it's the only thing it's the only other option or whatever is going to be the Democrats or Republicans. I mean, we don't have time for this, really, right? Like, I mean, if you really believe in climate change, if you really think that man is doing this, we don't have time for Democrats' incremental change. They're not even incrementally changing for the better. Joe Biden was bringing oil up, right? We were the highest oil producing country, I think, for like the past 4-10 years, something like that. We are not environmentally sound under Democrats. It's not going to help climate change. Democrats have decent rhetoric, but they do not do anything. So if you really believe in climate change, if you think these fires, these floods, and droughts are caused by man, you almost have to be a Green Party member. We don't have time for Democratic incremental change. Your grandkids will still be under the same amount of water as if it's the Democrat or Republican. They're just going to go back and forth for the next 10, 50, 20, 100 years, going back and forth, killing us slowly. Or we could change that.
they face new challenges today, operating within the political mainstream across the world. Kulsum Sharif, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Hello everyone, my name is Adam Ferrari.
Well, let's bring our guests into the show. We have joining us from Washington, D.C., Hans Noel, Professor of Government at Georgetown University. In South Devon, England, George Monbiot, an author and environmental activist. And in Bujumbura, Anne-Marie Behirabake. She's the Vice President of the Burundian Green Movement and President of the East Africa Green Federation. Welcome to you.
So see, we got chapters all around the world, right? So we would have a world coalition. As soon as the U.S. people, if we make our Green Party viable, the Green Party around the world would then be viable. The United States is all it would take is for us to get some senators, some governors, some say. Don't let us get the presidency, but if we did, we could talk to all these countries around the world that have green parties, and we could help them out. You know, we could all help each other, do commercials, whatever, YouTubes with each other and whatnot. And then, like I said before, the Belt and Road, China's trying to build the world, the Africa, South America, the global South. If we connect the West with the Green Party, and then we could happily just connect with the global South, because we all have the same kind of views once we're to the Green Party style.
To you all, if I could start with Hans. So the news peg, of course, is we have an election very soon in the United States. Let me start, Hans, by asking you, what do the Greens stand for?
Well, in the United States, the Green Party is, an attempt to be sort of a reflection of the Green Party internationally, but it also is just a third-party challenge protest type party, because most of the interests that the Green Party stands for are also incorporated into the Democratic Party. And so it's really people who are not satisfied with how much the Democratic Party is paying attention either to those issues or, in this election, to other issues, particularly the United States handling of the conflict in Gaza. So people who want to see a more pro-Gaza position out of the United States government want the Democrats to do more than they already are doing. The Republicans are on the other side for sure. And a lot of voters are going to use the Green Party as a vehicle for expressing that idea.
That is a really interesting point. And I'm wondering, George, in Devon, we've got to ask then, listening to Hans, what attracts people to vote for the Greens? Is it belief in their principles and policy agenda, or is it often simply a protest vote against one or both of the sort of establishment parties?
I mean, it can be either, it can be both. We've seen the Greens come and go over many decades. sometimes doing really well in elections, sometimes much less well. And it's quite hard to attribute that pattern to any clear pattern of external factors. I think sentiment changes. And, I would love to see Greens everywhere doing much better than they are.
Right.
But it's always an afterthought. I mean, in your introduction, you say, well, green issues were once on the sidelines. They're still on the sidelines. There has never been a time when environmental issues are front and center. And given the prominence they...
And if you want environmental issues front and center, I've had a few comments in my comment section talking about climate change, and that's their number one thing. You need to join the Green Party. You need to get in. You need to start speaking. You need to become a leader. Talk in the Green Party. The Democratic Party talks game, but doesn't do nothing. We've seen this for quite some time.
deserve, but they should be right at the front of our minds. This is the greatest predicament humanity has ever faced, and yet we scarcely talk about it. When you look at the news bulletins, it's right down there towards the bottom, if it's there at all.
I want to buy your house.
Interesting too. Anne-Marie in Bujumbura. I guess Greens in Africa, like other people elsewhere all around the world, they must be watching this US election. How are they seeing this? And are the priorities for Greens in Africa and the global south the same as for Greens in the global north in places like the US?
First of all, Greens in all the world are the same. We defend the same ideology. As I also represent Africa Green Federation, the whole Africa, I'm the vice president, and I'm also representing Africa in the Global Greens Coordination. As Greens, we have the same ideology. So Greens are seen, first of all, in Africa as a good area for protecting the planet, of protecting the human rights. We put in the priority human development in front of everything. We are against violence.
See, I can see the Green Party being big in the global south and picking up steam there pretty soon and fast.
Fight whatever come to fight people. Humanity should be in central of development. We defend ecological wisdom of management of the resources.
Let me take the question back to Hans in Washington, D.C. And no matter how strong the common green ground is, will Jill Stein's major role in this election be simply to decide how much vote or power Kamala Harris gets and whether she makes it into the White House or not, depending on how much she eats from support for the Democrats? Is that the way you see it, Hans?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely what it comes down to. I mean, one thing we can be pretty confident about with this election is that Jill Stein is not going to be the next president of the United States. We don't know much else. It's very, very close. And when it's close, any little thing can matter. So it's quite possible that the margin of victory in the handful of swing states that end up determining the outcome will be smaller than the number of votes that Jill Stein gets. We can't be sure where those votes are coming from. Maybe those are people who wouldn't have voted at all, but probably those are people who would have voted for the Democrat because the green interests, those common interests we were just discussing, they are, reflected in the...
Most green voters would not vote for the Democrats. A lot of Palestinians voted for the Green Party because they didn't want to vote for genocide. They had a protest vote. But a lot of people who vote for the Green Party wouldn't vote at all if there was no Green Party. I wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. I would have voted for probably a DSA candidate or somebody else. Like, I would never vote. I did vote for Barack Obama. Very disappointing that I did. Very disappointed that I did. He didn't do anything that he said he was going to do. And I think he was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. Joe Biden, I did not vote for him. Did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I would not vote for Hillary Clinton ever. Like, she was part of the crime bill. Joe Biden was part of the crime bill. Never, ever. And then Barack Obama had him as his vice president. How are you going to have the vice? the first black president of the United States is going to have Crime Bill Joe as his vice president. How does that make any sense? Yes, that is some United States like apple pie. That is so perfect. So Hans or Hans here is definitely pro-Democrat.
The Green Party here, but they're also reflected in the Democratic.
And also the Libertarians take more from the Republicans than the Greens take from the Democrats, if you want to go that way.
Party. The way we build coalitions in the United States is just different. And so the green interests are very much also represented in the Democratic Party. And ironically, if Jill Stein draws a lot of votes away from people who might otherwise vote Democratic because they want a bolder agenda, she may end up actually helping Donald Trump win the election.
All right, so they're not going to make it into power in the US in this election, but George, they did make it into power as part of coalition governments in a number of European countries. There was a bit of a green surge, I think we can say, going on the last few years in Europe. But then when you look at June parliamentary elections in the EU to local elections in September in Germany, you start to wonder, are the Greens in retreat now?
No question. Almost everywhere there's been a backlash against green policies. And that
Why is that, George?
It's partly been driven by the rise of the far right. The far right is extremely antagonistic to green policies, and unfortunately, public conversation often tracks that shift in politics. As people turn rightward, we hear less and less about environmental issues, or we hear bad things. You shouldn't invest in green policies. Climate scientists apparently are trying to rip you all off because obviously if you want to get really rich, become a climate scientist.
So a lot of people don't like climate change or don't want to invest in climate change. That's why I kind of go to some of the solutions. Like if you just talk about permaculture and putting food forests around schools and all neighborhoods really, but start with the neighborhoods that need it most. But then if you can just go outside and pick some fruit, come back in and make your food, that'd be pretty cool. You got chickens, goats, cows and whatnot, walking around and whatnot. You got certain people that'll go around, butcher them things and then pass out the meat and whatnot. That's free to cheap, right? Like it's not. And so I'm gonna make a video about some mycelium or mushrooms and whatnot in a little bit. But there's all kinds of things we can do. We need to do solar. We need to just volunteer and get solar panels and start putting them out in places, putting them on people's houses or whatever. But the things that need to be done, we just need to start doing it rather than waiting on politicians or whatever.
Did not say an oil executive. There's some really stupid narratives around, driven by climate science denial, often funded by fossil fuel companies. And unfortunately, a lot of people have succumbed to those people.
And so the Democrats are going to be taking money from fossil fuel companies, right? The Green Party isn't. If you're really about climate change, which if you're watching this video still, you're probably about climate change, then the Democrats aren't for you. They're just not. They're not going to save your great-grandchildren, your grandchildren, or I don't know when it's going to be. Like they said it was going to happen sooner, right? And the Republicans are like, or the right wing is like, oh, it didn't happen in 2000 or 2010 or whenever they said it was going to happen. All right, it's really kind of hard to gauge when stuff is really going to just blow up, right? The climate, the world is a whole big system. So you can see the stuff coming now. You can see these fires, these floods and all that. And so if we just keep it up, what if it takes 200 years? It might not be 50 years. It might not be 100 years. It might be in 200 years there's some huge catastrophe where we got water world now. We're just underwater and there's thousands of people alive living on the peaks of mountains and whatnot. But it might take 50 years. I don't know. But if it doesn't take 50 years, the right wing is going to be sitting there like, oh, well, see, we're here 50 years later. But then if it takes 200 years, whatever, it's going to take an amount of time. We're not exactly sure how long it's going to take. But if climate change is your thing, the Green Party is your people.
Stupid narrative. But there's also all sorts of distractions happening. We are constantly distracted, and culture wars have been a very effective distraction from the really important issues. And of course, the most important issues of all are the issues concerning our life support system, the Earth system, and whether it can continue to support us, whether the living planet will continue to be a habitable and hospitable environment for humanity, or whether it becomes hostile to us. Everything else fades into the background by comparison to this question. It should be front and center all the time, but it's constantly pushed aside.
Anne-Marie, as parts of the North...
And so that's another thing about the Green Party. We have a world coalition. If it's going to be front and center, we need all the countries. We need all the countries to be on board. If you just have two big countries not on board with the climate change initiative or whatever, say the U.S. and England or whatever, all the other countries are on board, but we just start producing, or not start, but keep producing all the pollution we produce, we're still going to throw the world off. It might take a little bit longer, but we're still going to throw the world off unless the other people in the world figure out how to take our pollution and our trash and make it not pollution and trash and recycle it or whatever. But then they'll be doing the thing for us. So like, we need to all get on board if this is your thing.
At least get embroiled in what George is describing there as false narratives and distractions. I'm wondering, do Greens in Africa feel the global North is shouldering its responsibilities towards the global South?
No.
Not every time, because we can say that in South we are affected by the bad policies made by global North, and we even require for reparation for they have to pay what they damage. So the global North affect a lot the climate change. So we in Africa we suffer a lot for the bad policies, the bad actions, the industrialization. We really need to that they would think about how they act. We call upon the responsibility from them.
Hans, how important?
And see, the Democrats do not care. They're not going to change anything about the global South. They're still going to run mines in Africa. They're still going to let the oil companies run mines in Africa and extort Nigeria. Like, the Democrats do the same thing the Republicans do to the rest of the world. It's not just about us right here. It's not just about trying to feel good for myself or yourself or whatever. If we want our kids and the world and our kids' kids to be at peace and have something, have stability, you got to go left. You got to go green. You got to go DSA. We need to build this left-wing coalition. The right doesn't, especially if you believe in climate change, which I keep saying for this video because it's about climate change. If you don't believe in climate change, you're probably not watching this video no more. But if you believe in climate change, the Democrats nor the Republicans got anything for you. It's got to be the Green Party. We have the World Coalition that can get this done.
Is what happens in November elections in the US, not only to the Greens in the US, but also to the fate of the Greens elsewhere around the world.
Well, at least in terms of the policies that Greens advocate for, it's a big impact. It really is going to matter a lot. The United States does need to, needs to be a leader if this is a policy area that you care a lot about, or to put it a different way, whatever the United States does just has a huge impact on how things play out elsewhere.
Right.
And so if Donald Trump is elected and he either himself or the coalition he puts together doesn't care about addressing climate change, thinks it's a hoax and a scam, and there's a mix of people on the Republican side. Some of them feel strongly about that, some of them don't, but that's the direction that a Republican administration would go. Or if Harris wins, then you would see an administration that wants to embrace a Green New Deal and wants to do some of these things that are advocated for. Possibly not as much as some Green voters would want, but a lot more. It's important to know that because we organize our coalitions differently in the United States, most of the Green interests are in the Democratic Party, and those interests are going to translate into what kind of leadership the United States demonstrates on this issue and frankly others in the next 4 years.
Okay, so voters, the idea that voters expecting more of their elected leaders on some of those, we can call them green issues, but I'm wondering, George, have green parties themselves lived up to expectations when they've participated in government on some of those key issues we've just heard now from Anne-Marie in Bujumbura, and we heard a moment ago in our report from Jill Stein talking about confronting war, violence, supporting human rights, protecting the environment. I mean, let's face it, the Greens, they're part of a government in Germany. And I looked up a report by TNE in June that cited Germany as one of the 12 EU countries which are projected to fail in meeting their 2030 environment targets. The same German government, which human rights groups like Human Rights Watch are warned are risking complicity in war crimes by supplying weapons to Israel in the current conflict. Things like that. Does that undermine the success and reputation of what Green parties stand for?
Well, in fairness, in Germany, the Green Party has pushed back against both of those positions. And of course, it hasn't been in sole charge in Germany, and that's the nature of coalition. You don't get everything you want. So, the Greens do keep trying.
Yeah, do you think people make that discernment, or do they put some of the blame on the Greens too?
Not always. Governments and partners in government get blamed for all sorts of things that they can't control. Voters aren't necessarily very discerning about who's responsible for what or why they might be in a difficult situation. And as we often see, unfortunately, people can vote directly against their own interests in elections. This has happened again and again and again, and we fear that it might happen in the US very shortly. So, yes, the Greens have always been on the back foot in politics. Politics doesn't respond very well to the Green agenda because a huge amount of politics is driven by money.
Exactly.
And the organizations with the greatest incentive to pour money into politics are the dirtiest and most antisocial corporations. Because if they don't pour money into politics, they will be regulated out of existence. So the dirtiest and most antisocial corporations come to dominate politics. That's called the pollution paradox. And we end up with the worst possible people exercising the greatest influence. And that's a very difficult environment for Green parties anywhere in the world to operate in.
Interesting. So we're talking about how the system may favour or not favour some parties. I've got to take this back then to Hans in the US. Does the system there prefer the two mainstream parties or prefer two parties, Hans? Is that what makes it even more difficult for people like parties like the Greens to make progress?
Protect your wealth.
Well, it's definitely true that our system favors a two-party system for a whole host of reasons. So with single-member districts and first-past-the-post voting, it values being able to come in first, which means if you're...
Excuses. People, get out there. Fill the Green Party. There's enough people that if the people who want a people-powered party get in the Green Party, we can win. We can beat them. But, what is it, 40-something% of people didn't vote last election? It's been up to 52% or so, 54% of people not voting in the last, say, 20 years or whatever in certain elections. You disenfranchise people. Get in our party. You Democrats who are actually progressive, get in our party. We can beat them if we stand up.
If you're, a third or fourth party, then you're not going to be able to do that. Also, our party system is really permeable, so that if you want to influence politics, you don't need to form a third.
Again, the Republicans started as a third party. The Republicans started as an abolitionist third party, and there was the Whigs and the Democrats. Both were pro-slavery. The Republicans, the abolitionists, were over slavery, and they started a third party. So you guys talk about Trump is so bad, he's evil, this and that. Democrats have no leadership. They have no direction. If this is all true, now is the time. For the Democrats, it's kind of easy. They got no leadership, no direction, no nothing. Oh, we have no power. It should be pretty easy to step over them. if the Republicans are as bad as you guys say they are, it's time, man. These fascists, this and that. And I'll tell you, the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans. They're just as fascist as the Republicans. They wrote the crime bill. Cops harassed me so often when I was young. I got pulled over on consecutive days by cops asking me if I stole the same car that I was driving the day before. And it was the same cop. And the first time it happened, I kind of laughed and said, "How?" I was like, "Okay, this is funny. Like, can I go?" And he's like, "No, give me your ID and this and that." And I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, what?" When I was young, I had an afro or braids, you know, like you could tell. But it was weird. And this is the Democrats. This is their crime bill. This is them militarizing the police. This is them putting us in jail for crack or anything, doing any kind of drug when they do drugs. Hunter Biden weighed out his drugs and got a pardon from his daddy who put my people in jail. So yeah, when you talk about the Democrats are better than Republicans, again, like, you have to have a privileged ass life to be telling somebody who has been harassed. Like, I thought a cop was gonna kill me. They used to mess with me so bad. They pulled me over once I turned 16 because I look grown, right? I look like a big man and stuff. And they pulled me over and harassed me and stuff. And one day I figured it out. I was like, oh man. I'm like, why are they acting like this to me? And I was like, oh, they're instigating me. They want me to like do something so they can shoot me. These dudes really want to kill me. And I realized that, right? And once I realized that, I started acting like a female dog, the B word. I was like, oh, yes, sir. Yeah. As soon as I would get pulled over, I'd grab my stuff, my insurance, everything. I would have it sitting on my lap, and I put my hands on the steering wheel. Yes, sir. How are you doing, sir? Today is a great day. Yeah, you want my license registered? It's right on my lap. I'll give it right to you. And I would just act totally just out the cat, you know, just crazy. And it got to the point where I was so good, they would look at me and be like, just go. And they would just turn and walk away. They wouldn't even take my stuff. They knew what I was doing because they knew I knew what they were doing. So they would just tell me, just leave. And they would turn and walk away after a while. So I got good at it. But you shouldn't have to be good at that stuff. But that's the Democratic Party. That is what the Democratic Party did to our society. And that to me is fascist. You hold down the few and say they can't do things that you let your son do and other people around you do. If it's not fascist, it's whatever it is. It ain't good. It's very, very bad.
Party, you can enter into the existing parties and reshape them.
No, you can't.
This is what's happened.
No, you can't. You can go into the Republican Party and reshape it if you're the Tea Party. They got Donald Trump now. They got their right-wing populists. You cannot go into the Democratic Party and reshape it. Democrat Obama, hope and change. I thought we were doing it, but he was a true Democrat and killed his own movement. Bernie Sanders said, "Let me get in this party. Let me reshape it." Was well on his way to reshaping it. Hillary Clinton, chop, 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 chop. No reshaping. No, none. 2020. Bernie Sanders, let me do this again. Let me reshape this party. Instead of going to the Green Party, instead of filling the Green Party in 2020, he went to the Democratic Party, and Barack Obama said, no, we're not going to let you do that. So no, you cannot go into these parties. And the Republican Party, you can change a little bit, but then again, we're not going to go into the Republican Party, right? We're going to go in there and change that. If we try to go into the Democratic Party, they will chop us up. They will kill our movement. It has been proven many, many, many times. Stop doing the same thing, acting like you're going to get something different. We can have a world coalition. If we stand up as Americans, we talk about, oh, we're so strong, we're all big and bad. Let's prove it. Prove it to the world how big and bad and how smart and how good we really are. Fill the party that is good, that is a people-powered party, but it needs you, the people, to fill it.
With environmental politics in the United States, and one reason why the Green movement doesn't seem to be as much attached to the Green Party in the United States, that movement is, playing out within the Democratic Party.
The movement in the United States is scared. Like a lot of people telling me, oh, you got to do it through the Democrat. No. They'll let you do so much. They might let this movement do so much, but they're going to stop it when they want to stop it.
For example, Hans, like when Joe Biden announced the green transition and his green agenda, that basically is part of a pattern of mainstream parties adopting the green agenda, leaving green parties with little to appear relevant to voters?
Well, I mean, yeah, so little to appear relevant to voters, but I mean, the other way to say it is, if you're.
But when you're committing a genocide, you're adding things that are still unacceptable, right? Like, even give them the benefit of the doubt. Say Joe Biden did adopt the Green Party's climate change agenda. You're committing a genocide. That's not acceptable, no matter who you are. The Republicans don't vote for anybody who's killing a whole set of people. It's not okay. That should be just an easy first thing, right? Like, if we could say that out loud, then nobody would vote for a Democrat or Republican, and we'd be like actual normal people. Why would you vote to kill these Palestinians like that? Like, just level all their stuff. Like, it's insane. Like, so yeah, they didn't take all our values, our climate change values, or whatever principles. They did not. Don't accept that. But even if they did, still, you're committing a genocide. That is still unacceptable. You can't do that.
Interests are being represented in a different way, then it doesn't matter whether or not Green parties are winning or Democratic Party is winning if the Democratic Party is doing what you would like them to do.
They're not.
And there's different ways of organizing things have different consequences. We were just discussing about in Germany the difficulty that the Green Party has building and coordinating with its governing coalition when it joins that. It's the same thing in the United States. It's just that it's not the Green Party that is in that governing coalition. It's the Green elements, the Green interests that are part of the Democratic Party. But
they're not.
And
they're lying.
If I care about that issue, I don't really care whether or not Green Party politicians get into office. I care about whether or not those policies get implemented. And I think in multiple cases, what you see is a struggle for those issues for the reasons.
Why is Hands on here? Why is this dude on this? Why don't you have a Green Party person from the United States, be it Jill Stein or Butch Ware, would be fantastic on here. Why in the world is this dude on here? This is a Democrat sitting here talking about the Green Party on a Green Party interview show or whatever. No, I hadn't watched this before, and so I didn't know what was going to happen, but this dude should not be on here, in my opinion.
That we've just been discussing.
All right. Let me take it back to Anne-Marie in Bujumbura. As we see Green politicians struggle in the US, as we see the Greens on the retreat, taking a step back in European elections, how does that impact Greens around the world, particularly in the global South and Africa?
As you could imagine, in Africa it is worse because in our countries, voters do not look at the good policies, do not look at the good ideologies. They look to those traditional political parties that can give something. The ones that have held every resources in the country. So we struggle in the whole countries in Africa. We struggle to get into power. On very few countries have MPs, have elected people. So we really struggle because we do not have enough resources to mobilize people, enough resources to... I can say that in Africa there is a lot of corruption. So people are vote just because they are corrupted, just because they have something. So we get a lot of problem to influence the policies to get into power. It is a big problem. It is a huge problem, I can say.
George, what is the future?
Again, the United States can influence the world. If we make our Green Party strong, vote some people in, we can help the Green parties around the world, which will help the entire world.
Future hold for the Greens, do you think, when you look into your green crystal ball?
Well, a bit like Hans, I'm much more interested in what the future holds for environmental policy than it holds for Green parties in particular. I mean, much as I want to see them prosper, it is the policies that count. And Hans is completely right about that. And we need to see those policies mainstreamed regardless of which party is in power. Unfortunately, that just does not happen, which is why we still need the Green parties there. to act
What was the point of
as
the
a
first
kind
part of
of
that?
irritant, as a prod to the other parties to say, why aren't you dealing with it? Now, I am worried that Stein might take away crucial votes from Harris in the US and usher Trump in. And I think, that is a real danger. At the same time, it's really important that we have people outside the two main political parties saying you should be pushing much harder on these issues. And it has been very striking in the Harris campaign that, while we know she is broadly sympathetic to taking action to prevent climate breakdown, she has scarcely talked about it at all. It is the great roaring issue that nobody is hearing about. It just hasn't featured large in this election at all. And yet, from the environmental point of view, this is an existential election. I mean, if Donald Trump takes power, then that could be the end of effective global climate action. He's going to tear up coalitions which are aiming to prevent catastrophic climate breakdown.
So if that's true, Donald Trump is going to do all this climate killing, then the Green Party is probably the only party that can bring it back from the brink of destruction, the world, right? What are the Democrats going to do? Incremental change, a little bit of nothing. So, yeah, I mean, I just don't understand how these people can keep saying, let's do the same thing. We're going to get something different this time. You're not. You're just not.
He will do so gleefully. He'll just rip up environmental rules left, right, and centre. And so, we urgently need this issue to be mainstream. Why aren't we hearing much more of it?
All right, that's a good point. I saw Anne-Marie for a moment nodding your head. I think do you have something to chime in to say about that, the idea that the most important thing is the green agenda makes it through to the mainstream rather than who makes it to power?
How do you get a small business loan?
All people all over the world need to be realistic. The climate change negative impact are in reality, and we need to be talked by those what we see. We need to change. We need to be conscious that climate change. We need to follow politics that think about that. Because
but Anne-Marie, do you think Green parties in Africa see that sort of sentiment which George was talking about, that they know, for example, that their main success?
She said we need to be realistic. Be realistic, people. The Democratic Party doesn't care. They're not going to help you. They're not going to do anything about climate change. So be realistic. He's asking her, so should we just abandon the Green Party and pick the Democrats or whatever party that's going to half-ass do some of the stuff that we talk about? Let's see what she has to say.
Is impacting the policies of mainstream parties rather than realistically hoping to take power in Africa.
Yes, exact. We need to mainstream this philosophy, and we need to put into action and to put resources in protecting environment, in implementing the agreement. In all COPs, they make good agreements, but they don't put in action what they agree. So we need Greens, political Green parties to implement all the agreement. We need to implement Paris Agreement. We need to implement all good agreements we made in the COPs.
Let me try and bring in a quick final word, if I could. Sorry, Anne-Marie, but I think we've just...
So, yeah, she said we want to mainstream the policies, right? Of course, we want to mainstream the policies, but she said we need Greens because the Democrats and these right-wing parties aren't going to do it. And again, now, you got Donald Trump, you got these right-wingers all around the world. Viktor Orban, Bolsonaro, all these people, they talk to each other. They have a right-wing coalition. They, like Steve Bannon, be going to Europe. I think he might even be in Europe now doing a show. But they move around and talk to each other, the right-wingers. And they help each other out. And as long as they agree on a few things, they're cool with it. Like on the left, we act like we got to agree on everything. There are a few things that are kind of are like non-starters, right? You can't be doing genocide. You just can't. Most people want to be pro climate change. I try to talk more about the like permaculture, mushrooms, different things like animals, ducks, pigs, geese, whatever, that'll be in the permaculture. I try to talk more about solutions than just climate change, because climate change is very controversial to some people. They don't even believe in it, right? So yeah, they're trying to make it so like the Democrats are going to do something for you, or the center, the liberals are going to do something for us. They're not. They don't care. They're capitalists. They want money. They want these businesses to keep giving them money, and these businesses are polluting and want to keep polluting so that they can save money. So the Democrats are going to let them pollute at a rate that's too much, whatever it is. So if you really believe in climate change, which this is 26 minutes in, I've been talking, we're probably close to an hour now. So if you're still watching this, you believe in climate change, you're a Green Party member now. Call your local Green Party, become a Green Party member. If you want to run. If not, get your friends to join the Green Party, and out of your group of 5 or 10, find somebody to run.
Just got 30 seconds left. I'm going to try and give a quick final word to Hans in Washington, D.C. Hans, given everything we've discussed, is there a role for the Greens beyond simply impacting the mainstream parties? Is there a path to power for the Greens? And is there a path to power beyond simply coalitions?
The people, it's you that's the power, or the path.
I think in the United States, the path to power for green interests runs through the existing party system. It is not going to displace one of the existing parties, short of some radical change in our institutions. And so the path to influence and power is to make this issue be one of the issues that is very, very central to
make America green again.
What it means to be a Democrat. I think actually the green interests have done a lot of progress on that front, and there's a lot more to be done. And that's the place where you will see any change, not whether or not Jill Stein gets votes or not.
Fantastic. This has been a really good show, and to thank all of our guests. We managed to get in a lot of different issues, a lot of different perspectives from right around the globe. Let's thank Hans Noel.
Thank you to all 4 of them for having this conversation. I wanted to cover it. Green Party around the world. Hans, I don't think should have been there. He was kind of a Democratic operative in this discussion. We don't need that. We want to talk about what the Green Party is and what the Green Party can do, right? So, yeah, if you are still here, let's join the Green Party, become a Green Party member. If you can run, if you don't want to run, find a friend to run. But if you care about climate change, man, it's really the Green Party or bust. The Democrats aren't going to do nothing for you. The liberals around the world aren't really doing nothing for you. But the biggest thing is the Green Party has a world coalition. If the United States makes the Green Party big here, that'll make the Green Party big around the world. And then we can do a lot. We can really do some stuff with climate change. We can do some stuff with hunger and security. We could do some stuff with even like regulations on like mining and kids not being able to be in mines, or just stuff being cleaner around the world. So yeah, we'll leave it about there. And that's why, I like to look at stuff from across the spectrum.